Hi guys, welcome to our short lecture on writing with motion. The term cinematography is from the Greek roots meaning writing with motion. Now, cinematography is more than just photography. It is the process of taking ideas, words, actions, emotional subtext, tone, and all other forms of nonverbal communication and rendering them in visual terms. Now, as we will use them here, cinematic technique is the entire range of methods and techniques that we use to add layers of meaning and subtext in the context of or the content of the film. Actors, sets, dialogues, and actions are part of that content. Okay? The tools and techniques and the variations are wide-ranging in scope. This is at heart of the collaboration between the director of photography and the director himself or herself. Now, the cinematographer, in collaboration with the director, has the job to build a visual world. Now, when we create a film project, one of our primary tasks is to create a visual world for the characters to inhabit. Now, this visual world is an important part of how the audience will perceive the story, how they will understand the characters and their motivations. Now, think of films like Blade Runner or Star Wars or the Marvel films. Okay? They all have definite identifiable universes in which they exist. Okay? It consists of locations, sets, and wardrobes, even sounds. But to a large extent, these worlds are created through cinematography. I want you to take a look at these images in front of you. Now, these are screen captures of a film called Blade Runner. Okay, as you can see, this sequence, without a single line or dialogue, we know that it is high tech, or that the director actually presented us with a very futuristic world. One with giant electric signs, one with flying cars, with exploding skyscrapers. Okay, now we can see that, okay, this film's establishing shot communicates that, okay, this is a science fiction, futuristic film. Then, if you're going to continue with the sequence, now, once you get to inside one of the buildings, there is a sudden shift. Okay? The interior is not futuristic at all. One thing you will learn as a filmmaker is that everything has to be there for a reason. For every choice you make, whether in the story, location, props, and other elements to build the world inside the film, okay? Now, in this particular sequence, the character, his name is Decker, enters in his trench coat with an upturned collar, provides us with the final clue. Okay, what is that? That this could be a scene from a film noir detective story. Now, the director is sending us a simple message that this may be in the future with flying cars and such, but at the heart of it all, it is still an old-fashioned detective story, all communicated entirely through the visual means. So, how do we do it? As cinematographers, directors, production designers, editors, how do we accomplish these goals? Setting or building a world to be inhabited by the character. What are the essential elements we work with to manipulate and to create this visual image? Now, if cinema is a language, then we must ask, what is the structure of that language? What is the vocabulary? What are the rules of grammar, the structures of this cinematic language? What are the tools of cinematography and filmmaking, and the essential techniques and methods and elements that we can use to tell our story visually. So how do we tell that story? We use the visual language of cinematography. Now, what we're talking about here is not the physical tools of filmmaking, like the camera, the dolly, the lights, the cranes, the camera mounts. What we're talking about is the conceptual tools of the trade. So what are they? What are the conceptual tools of visual storytelling that we employ in all forms of visual storytelling? There are many, but we can roughly classify them into some general categories like the frame, light and color, the lens, movement, texture, establishing shots, and point of view. Selecting the frame is the fundamental act of filmmaking. As filmmakers, we must direct the audience's attention where to look. Okay? Look here. Now, look here. Now, over there. Okay? Having the control of making the audience look where we want them to look is one of the fundamental skills that a filmmaker must have. Now, choosing the frame is a matter of conveying the story, but it also is a question of composition, rhythm, perspective. Now, take this image for example. This is a scene from a film called Punch Drunk Love. Okay? It gives us a great deal of information about the situation and the main character. So, when you look at the frame, instantly, you know that the film or the character inside the film is isolated. He is cut off from most of the world. Okay? The wide and distant shot emphasizes his isolation and loneliness, reinforced by the color scheme and the lack of wall decorations. Okay? The dull, shapeless overhead fluorescent lighting underscores the mood and tone of the scene. And finally, the negative space on the right. Okay? The blank space on the right not only plays into the isolation and loneliness, but into the possibility of something is about to happen. Another example is in this frame from a beach scene in Angel Heart also communicates a great deal. Now, there is something odd, out of balance in this unconventional framing. Most of the frame is sky, negative space. Now, we barely see the beach at all. One man is bundled in a coat and the other with or wearing a t-shirt. Even though it hardly seems like good tanning conditions, now the viewpoint is distant and observational. Now, we know this is going to be no ordinary everyday conversation based on how the elements are presented. Even when the dialogue begins, you would normally expect the director to go into a close-up, but here, the camera hangs back, reinforcing the strangeness of the situation. The next is color and light. Light and color are some of the most powerful and flexible tools in the cinematographer's arsenal. Lighting and controlling color are what takes up most of the director of photography's time on most sets, and of course for good reason. They also have a special power that is shared only by a very few art forms such as music and dance, because they have the ability to reach people at the gut, at the emotional level. This image, again from Blade Runner, is the very definition of cinematic language as we use the term here. Visual tools that add dimensional layers of meaning to the content of the story. In a climatic frame from the Blade Runner, The stabbing shafts of light and the silhouette bars on the window instantly communicate a man ensnared in a high-tech nightmare world. Next is the lens. Again, we're not talking about the physical lens. What concerns us here is how various lenses render images in different ways. This is a powerful tool for visual storytelling, the ability of optics to alter our perception of the physical world. Every lens has a personality, a flavor, an inflection. It adds to the image. Okay? There are many factors involved like contrast and sharpness, for example. But foremost, the most influential aspect of a lens is the focal length, how wide or how long it is. A short focal length has the wider field of view, while a long focal length is like a telescope or binoculars. It has a narrow field of view. A long lens compresses space and a wide lens expands and distorts space. These can be very powerful in storytelling. Now, look at this frame, for example. This image is captured from the film Seven, a murder mystery film. Okay? Now, the extremely long lens compresses the space and makes the transmission towers seem like they're on top of each other. Okay? Now, the visual metaphor is established. It looks like a spider's web or a trap. Okay? It is a powerfully graphic and arresting image that precisely reinforces the story point at the moment. Because in the film Seven, they have to uncover several different facts amongst the lies that the suspects or the other characters have told them. Okay? This is one of the most interesting films that I've watched. So if you have time, please watch it. And our next example is the complete opposite. Now, we see the opposite effect in the frame from the Lycanthesis. Okay? Here, an extremely wide lens expands our perception of space and distorts the face. It has an effect that is both comedic and ominous. Next is visual texture. Now, these days, we rarely shoot anything straight, meaning a scene where we merely record reality and attempt to reproduce it exactly as it appears in life. What does it mean? Okay, in most cases, particularly in feature films, commercials, certainly in music videos, we manipulate the image in some way. We add in texture, we added texture from post-production, we add in lighting, we added other elements to help us communicate our story. Okay? This is not confused with the surface texture of objects. When we say visual texture, there are many devices that we can use to accomplish this. Okay? Changing the color and contrast of the picture, for example. Desaturating the color of the image by using filters, fog, smoke effects, rain, using unusual film stocks, various printing techniques, and of course, the whole range of image manipulation that can be accomplished with digital image on the computer. Okay? The list goes on and on. Some of these image manipulations are done with the camera, some are done with lighting, some are done with mechanical effects, and some are done in post-production, in editing. A particularly dramatic example is the film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Okay? The images are in front of you. The cinematographer, Roger Deakins, experimented with many camera and filter techniques to create a faded postcard, sepia-toned look that he and the director envisioned. But none of them actually proved satisfactory. In the end, he turned to what was then an entirely new process. It's called the digital intermediate, where the original images are shot on film and ultimately will be projected on film theaters. So, basically, you have two projectors projecting the same image. Okay? One was with the characters and the other without. Okay? So, it's a complicated image so that, okay, we can, or the cinematographer can achieve that postcardish sepia tone look. Okay? But of course, nowadays, we can do that in post-production, in coloring. Okay? There are vast array of tools for image making that computers afford us. Okay? So, having specific tones or colors in mind can be done during post-production. The next is movement. Now, movement is a powerful tool for filmmaking. In fact, movies are one of the few art forms that employ motion and time. In this opening sequence, for example, now this film is a film called Working Girl. Yeah. This is an excellent example of exciting, dynamic, and joyful motion that serves an important part of storytelling. Now, it is a kinetic whirling helicopter shot that begins by circling the head of the Statue of Liberty, then picks up the Staten Island ferry, and then ultimately goes inside in a dissolve that simulates continuing with a single shot to find the main character played by Melanie Griffith. Okay? This is far more than just powerful dynamic motion. It is also a clear visual metaphor that the story is about the main character's transition from a working girl secretary trapped in a dreary existence where every day starts with a ride uh, on the ferry, and by the end of the film, she is transformed into a strong, independent woman who stands proud and tall, like the Statue of Liberty. Now, next is establishing shots. Okay? Um, the film clip that I showed you is actually a very good example of an establishing shot. Okay? Establishing is the ability of the camera to reveal or conceal information. Think of it as visual equivalent of exposition, which in verbal storytelling means conveying important information or background to the audience. It is really at the heart of storytelling visually, letting the camera reveal information, okay, that is usually more cinematic way of getting information across to the audience by showing images rather than by dialogue or voiceover. Okay? You can just show your audience, okay, rather than tell them using the dialogue or voiceover. Next is point of view or POV. Point of view is a key tool of visual storytelling. We use the term in many different ways on a film set, but most often used meaning is to have the camera see something in much the same way as one of the characters would see it. To view the scene from that of the character's point of view. So, POV shots tend to make the audience more involved in the story for the simple reason that what they see and what the character sees are momentarily the same thing. In a sense, the audience inhabits the brain and experiences the world of the character. Now, putting it all together, filmmaking is a strange and mysterious enterprise. It involves mixing and coordinating many different elements, some of them artistic, some of them technical and businesslike. Now, in particular, the cinematographer must be able to bridge that gap Okay? To understand the practical side of dealing with camera, with lenses, with the digital aspects, the file type, the workflow, and so on, but also have their minds firmly planted in the artistic side of creating a visual world or visual metaphor and storytelling. Now, a cinematographer has to have that balance between artistry and technical know-how. Okay? The third aspect as well is being an amateur psychologist, so to speak. On the film set, there is no more fundamental collaboration than that of the cinematographer and the director. So, in a way, a cinematographer must see in the eyes of the director, the vision of the director, and he must put that particular vision inside the lens or inside the camera to be recorded uh, via video. Okay? Many directors are adept at conveying their visions of the project either verbally or with drawings or metaphors or even photographic references or pegs. And some directors are not as good as this. They have a visual concept, but they are not able to communicate it well with their collaborators. In other cases, the director does not have a particular visual concept and wants help in developing one. So that's where the cinematographer comes in. Okay? Uh, in these instances, it is really up to the cinematographer to reach into the director's head and try to understand what it is that he or she wants to see or wants to accomplish. If there are missing pieces in the visual puzzle that is the film project, then it is up to the DP to fill up those blank spots with artistic inspiration, collaboration, and even leadership. Now, sometimes this brings into play another role the cinematographer must play. This is being a diplomat, which may call for a greater deal of delicacy and being careful about how one phrases a suggestion, especially to the director. Okay? In any case, it is up to the cinematographer to make the director's vision come to life. Okay? We are in the business of making things happen for the director, taking artistic ideas and implementing them in the real world on the film set. Okay? As the director, as the director's job is to envision the film, it's up to the cinematographer to interpret that vision and put it visually or to put it literally on the screen of the director. Okay? Uh, in a way, the cinematographer or the director of photography makes the director's dream come alive in a very challenging and satisfying undertaking. Now that ends my lecture on visual language. Now the source of the information that I shared to you is from the book Cinematography Theory and Practice Image Making for Cinematographers and Directors, written by Blaine Brown. If you have any questions, you can ask them during our synchronous sessions, or you can send them via email or via course messages. I hope you learned something from this video. Thank you very much and keep safe.